Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
Okay, welcome to episode 32 of the Near Memo with David, Mike, and me. We're here as always to talk about the latest in local commerce, social media, and search. And as always, there's more things to talk about than we have time to talk about. But we picked out a number of things I think that are interesting that are going on today, and will show up in the Friday's newsletter. I was going to say something about depending on when you're listening to this, but that doesn't matter. Okay. All right. So I think, David, you were going to lead us off with some discussion about some insights from a McKinsey survey about B2B buying.
Yeah, there was a McKinsey survey. It's actually a year old at this point. It was actually August of 2020, or maybe it was October of 2020. But I don't think that the insights from it are necessarily wrong. The gist is that most people expect the sort of during COVID buying behaviors for B2B buyers anyway to more or less continue when the pandemic is over. And a couple of really interesting findings from my standpoint anyway, and relevant to companies that are selling to small businesses, obviously. That's why this article sort of caught my attention. The first was that ordering and reordering, basically 35% of businesses prefer self-service as opposed to talking to either a remote salesperson or a field salesperson. Field sales, is a pretty strong minority in terms of preference, something around 20% kind of across the board, which also kind of ties in with a lot of stuff you've written, Greg, about just people's, lack of interest in sort of face-to-face risk during COVID. But most people expect that the habits that have formed over the last year and a half in the B2B space will sort of continue. And then the one that really caught my attention as someone who works, doing product at a B2B company, Demand Science, the pretty staggering to me, actually, that up to 32% of B2B buyers were willing to spend between $50,000 and up to $500,000 without actually talking to a salesperson, end-to-end digital self-service. And that was just a much higher number of a purchase that people are willing to do without talking to someone in sales. And it certainly strikes me that, if you've operated on a not necessarily a product-led or product-first model with your software business to date, you might be missing out on 32% of your audience. I mean, a $500,000 contract is not exactly a typical SMB level contract. And so if you're under that amount, which I assume is basically everyone on this podcast, and you don't have some kind of freemium or free trial product experience that people can take before talking to a salesperson, you're potentially missing out on a huge chunk of your potential customer base.
So was the sample entirely small businesses, or was it B2B buyers sort of?
No, B2B buyers generally. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, if anything, it skews larger businesses are also willing to make pretty large purchases without talking to a salesperson. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think the one of the takeaways for me that's interesting is sort of the fact that fewer and fewer people want to talk to salespeople, sort of in general. I mean, I think your product-led growth point is very well taken. People want to engage with the thing that they're buying, and they want to see it for themselves rather than hearing a bunch of benefit statements. But it goes back in my mind to some of those earlier surveys that we saw from Call Rail and Constant Contact about how what small businesses want is partnerships with people that are going to help them, not to be pitched. Right? They don't want to be pitched, and I think so much of sales is still stuck. You have everybody sort of saying, "Oh, we do consultative sales, and the salesperson has got to be a partner and all of that." But I think there's still a lot of sales that are very much about pitching and pushing, and that people just don't want to have to deal with that at all. I mean, I think that's one of the sort of superficial takeaways, perhaps, from this is that you're so much effort is expended in sales, but it's comparatively worth less and less, I think, in the whole buying cycle.
Right, and something like account experience or customer experience is worth much more. And should this theoretically, these kinds of reports should be encouraging a shift of internal resources, both in terms of dollars spent and sort of where people are allocated more onto the customer support and service side, as opposed to the pure sort of traditional pitching sales side. Yeah.
So, Mike, you wanted to say something. I don't want to cut you off, but
just that the corollary is also customer success. That this support institution needs to be able to help people find the next value in the product as well, and that may be an upsell, it may not be, but it requires selling of some sort in that organization as well. So it requires a shift in how businesses are run. I mean, we've experienced this with the software products we use this week, where we totally onboarded by ourselves. We've been using it for 32 episodes. They upgraded to V2O. A bunch of things broke, and we can't get support. It's very frustrating. And if they had said, "Oh, if you just buy this next level up, you would have got support," I would have bought the next level up, but I couldn't. I bought the next level up, but I still didn't get support. So the point is that I think that you have to rethink how to fill customers' needs, not just from a support point of view, but a product point of view as well. And that may include some sales on that side of the house.
Well, I mean, this
should include sales.
This is the conventional wisdom that you have to be customer centric. This is sort of cliche marketing language, but too many organizations don't really take it to heart. They use the rhetoric, but they don't really think about what it means. I can tell you, just from an overall experience standpoint, so we've got an internal group called Solutions Engineering, which is not customer success exactly. It sits somewhere between product and sales, kind of. I'm not on that team, so I'm probably not doing a good job representing it. Crystal Tang is on that team, and I know that every time they involve one of those people in a sales call, the success rates go way up because they know the product and they can really provide useful information. Whereas very often the sales rep is just reading a script or some version of a script, and they don't have a lot of product knowledge, and they're not really there to help the customer. I'm not talking about Uberall now. I'm talking about just in general. They're really there to make a quota, right, or whatever their particular objective is. And so, and reports like the McKinsey report are interesting, but they don't change culture. That's the problem. Is that you can read a report, you can say, well, that's interesting, and then you go back to your organization, and everything is the way that it's always been.
Right, but it also opens the door for startups who don't have the legacy sort of company baggage or inertia that's preventing this kind of mindset. So interesting report, and I think equally valid and unfortunately equally valid in September of 2021 as it was September of 2020. So
yeah, well, or not, unfortunately, as the case may be. It reflects reality, to people.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.